Hello, Angus, ABL Pedals here with another exciting current affairs. Today on the bench we are looking at what is maybe one of the most popular yet polarising guitar pedals. It is the Boss DS-1, famously used by Kurt Cobain, Wata from Boris, all sorts. But we'll get to that in due course. This is maybe one of the most polarising guitar pedals out there in that people either love it or hate it, and it is still super popular. So without further ado, let's get into this. We'll look at the schematic and I'll talk you through it, and maybe we can look at how we can modify this to make a more usable, in my opinion, distortion pedal. Loved by some, hated by others, what you can't deny is the Boss DS-1's popularity. First released in 1978, it is probably one of the most popular distortion pedals of all time. The circuit consists of a transistor boost stage cascading into a non-inverting op-amp, along with hard clipping and a Big Muff style tone control. As I said in the intro, Kurt Cobain was a famous DS-1 user, with one of his personalised pedals selling for an eye-watering $75,000 in 2022. Okay, so to have a look at the schematic, we have it here. You'll think when you first see it that, oh, that's not that different from the Rat or the DOD-250 that you've already covered, and that's kind of because it's not, basically. This is the next continuation of that, with this a couple of extras added. That's sort of why I've done it in this order, if you've been paying attention and watching. So, but what are the main changes? Well, there's these input and output buffers that are done with transistors. They're bipolar junction transistors rather than JFETs like that were on the Rat, for example. And I'm not going to go into what buffers do, but they help with Boss's soft switching and other stuff. But that's kind of regardless. So it comes through some capacitors, some filtering, and then it hits this first gain, this transistor boost gain stage, which is, if I'm honest, has too much gain. It really you'll hear it when we go through it, and it really ramps up the signal suddenly. Mostly, a common modification is to change this 22 ohm resistor to a bit higher so that it kind of balances the gain out a little more. We are already boosting this gain stage. We're on 10, and then we go to 11 by boosting that some more with an op-amp. This schematic is the kind of the later version of the DS-1. I think because the original one was just a single op-amp, but that went out of production, and so they used this dual one with but anyway, it doesn't really matter. This is what I've got on the breadboard. I've got an op-amp gain stage, and again, gain control that was on the Rat. It's kind of again got that slightly, it's more acting like a bit of an active filter, basically. Like, it is increasing the gain, but when we're already increasing it so much, there isn't a lot of headroom. So it's kind of blending in that filter stage more than anything. Before then leaving that, it gets compressed by some diodes, which kind of help create the sort of tight compression and distortion of the circuit itself, rather than just being an unruly raw sound. And then it goes from there into the tone control, which this is a really common type of tone control, but it's maybe the first time we've come across a tone control like this in these videos. In fact, it is. It's commonly known as the Big Muff style tone control, because on one side it's got a low pass filter, the other side it's got a high pass filter, and that creates a little bit of a scoop in the middle. And its stock configuration, it gets really harsh after 12 o'clock. That's one of the changes I'm going to do to it. It's kind of, at the same time, that's what the pedal's known for, so I don't know, but yeah, I don't think this is the first time this came around, but this has become a really common type of tone control. And then it goes to the level control. Sorry, what I wanted to add is, you'll remember on the Rat how it was just a low pass filter that as you turn it up it basically killed the highs. But well, this is that, but on either side of the potentiometer basically. And then it leaves the volume control to go to the output buffer. Yeah, as I said, it's the next stage in kind of how a lot of these circuits progressed from what I can see. But let's forget all that and get it back on the breadboard for some proper inspection. In the intro there, I've got a little confession to make. I was using the pedal in front of a dirty amp, which is maybe kind of more of its intended purpose, and we'll get into how much of a difference that actually makes and maybe why that is in due course. But now that I've talked you through the schematic, let's have a quick playthrough. If you're watching this, you've probably played a DS-1 before, so I'm really not going to dwell on it. But here, first of all, I've got a Les Paul type guitar. Here's my clean tone. Let's hear this. So what else? What is there to say that hasn't already been said? It's, it's quite compressed. It gets quite shrill. That's what a lot of people don't tend to like about it. But there is a massive amount of gain, probably too much gain, which I'm gonna get into in due course. But yeah, I don't want to. You've probably played this before, and I think that shrillness is kind of the very polarizing part of it. Also, apologies about the noise. This is because this is all wires. It's picking up all sorts of interference and stuff. So I am trying to keep the noise at best. But alas, right. To talk us through the circuit, the parts of the circuit, that Electrosmash article that I got the schematic from split it up into 5 parts, and I'm pretty much going to keep to those 5 parts. So we've got the input and output buffers, we've got the transistor boost stage, we've got the gain stage, we've got, interestingly, I'm using the 4558 chip with the buffer in front of it because I think that's what the modern ones have, because the original chip's not in production and it kind of helps recreate how the original chip worked, but that doesn't really matter right now. The gain stage and the clipping stage, I guess the gain and the clipping's kind of together, with the tone control and then the output and the volume. So firstly, let's hear it at the first buffer. Right, this is it at the, that's the clean, so it's pretty much the same. The buffer at each end helps with impedance through the signal. Some people would say, oh, but it doesn't really matter if it's true bypass. But because of the soft switching in Boss's pedals, the buffer at either end actually helps it do its thing. And buffers get a bit of a bad rep. They're pretty helpful. So that's it there. Now let's hear it at after the gain stage. This is going to shoot up. Hear that? So. So already we're pushing the amp, we're overdriven, we're pretty much peaking as much as we can at that stage. Now, one of the modifications I can do is to reduce that, but we'll get to that. And now we're going to amplify that signal some more. So that gain kind of doesn't really do very much. What it does do is blend that filter in. kind of amplifies the the kind of filtered already huge tone. I mean, look, that's the gain at 3 o'clock, and that already sounds huge. So yeah, then we go to these clipping diodes, which compress it. To the tone control, which I don't think we've come across this tone control yet in these videos. It's what's kind of commonly known as a big muff type tone control, where one side's a low pass filter, one side's a high pass, and it scoops a little in the middle. But you can play with the values to do it, but the tone control is the tone control, isn't it? And then that goes to the volume control and the output buffer. So as you can hear, it's the tone control really dictates a lot of the sound of this, almost more than the rest of the pedal, because it filters it so much, and it's what probably helps create the kind of shrillness, contributes to the shrillness that a lot of people don't like about the pedal. And then yeah, there's too much gain. As like, if you use it low gain, there's not that much to it, which is why I was saying it works out the front of a dirty amp, that it's like you're boosting it more, which is kind of what that was the intention back in the day, was to kind of slam a dirty amp that's already overdriven, and that's how you kind of get that 70s sort of early 80s hard rock tone by doing that sort of setup. But yeah, let's have a little look at how we can modify this now. So in terms of how to modify this circuit, we kind of want to reduce the shrillness. We want to ironically reduce the gain, I think, or just sort of fatten it out a little more and make it not quite so shrill, along with a few other adjustments here and there. But I think that's mostly what it is. We want to reduce the shrillness and maybe make it a little more rounded, for a lack of a better term. So I've looked at a few different ways to do it, and there's a lot of modifications for this. One of the more famous ones is Keeley's All-Seeing Eye, and Brian Wampler's got a whole book about them, which I actually got a few for this from in the first place. I'll do them step by step, but so here we are again with the pedal as stock. So first things first, I want to do some of that transistor boost. So I'm going to reduce the gain by swapping out that capacitor, the 22 ohm that's on the emitter on the gain stage. So that's already a bit less, like we're just not slamming the op amp quite so hard, and because we are reducing that gain, we can maybe adjust this filter a little bit in order to fatten out the bottom end response. But it's still a bit shrill, so I want to compress it a bit less. Here's the LEDs for the clipping. And yeah, I just want to swap one capacitor in the tone control. So we've got a much smoother sweep there now. quite common to have those LEDs on a switch, so you can switch between the two. In a future video, I'd quite like to reinvent this a little bit with doing away with the transistor stages and replacing them all with a quad op amp, which I think, but we'll dwell on that another time, which it can be done. But one last thing you could do, because that was quite a sudden change with the resistor and the transistor stage, but you could set up that resistor as a kind of with a potentiometer to make a kind of pre-gain. So let's give that a quick try.
Talk amongst yourselves whilst I try that. Right, so.
Forgive me that it's kind of hanging around, but so this can be set up to. Well, I've got it set up the wrong way, but as a kind of pre-gain. So you could set it up that it has two gains. And it means you can kind of set that as to how you would like it, basically. I think. So it's kind of interesting how you can play about with it, but that was just a few little changes. You know, we changed out what? A resistor, two capacitors, and the LEDs, the diodes, and that changed quite a lot. You know, that's two capacitors even. And that changed it quite dramatically, so there's a lot you can do with this circuit. What you like ultimately. So thank you for joining me for that little look at what can be done to the DS-1 and how it works and what it does. I know for sure there's a few of you either love or hate it out in YouTube land. Keep your eyes peeled for that video that I'm going to do in the coming weeks or months where I reinvent it a little bit. I'm quite looking forward to that. But if you've enjoyed this, remember to comment, like, share, tell your friends, subscribe, all that stuff, really helpful. Until next time, keep on rocking.